The city was still waking up when the boy stepped out of his narrow alley, arms full of newspapers. His small frame almost disappeared behind the stack he carried, his thin legs moving quickly so he could reach the corner before the other vendors did. Morning headlines. Read all about it, he shouted, his voice raw from repeating the same words every day. The streets smelled of dust and smoke, and carriages splashed muddy water as they passed. His shoes were torn at the soles, flapping with each step, but he didn't complain. He had no time for complaints. The boy was only 12, but his face bore the seriousness of someone much older. His sharp eyes darted from passerby to passerby, searching for customers, and when someone ignored him he only shouted louder. Each coin mattered. It meant bread, a little milk, maybe medicine for his mother. Around him, other vendors competed for attention, some louder, some pushier. But he had his own way, polite, earnest, never cheating a customer. People began to notice that about him. A few regulars even bought from him daily, not because they needed the paper but because they admired his spirit. Yet beneath the boy's energy, there was a quiet desperation. Every coin he earned weighed heavy in his pocket, not for what it could buy for himself, but for the survival of his family. When the boy returned home after his morning round, he pushed open the door of their single-room apartment. The air smelled of damp walls and boiled potatoes. His mother lay on a thin mattress in the corner, coughing softly. She had once been lively and strong, but illness had stolen her health. "Did you sell them all?" she asked, her voice weak. "Almost," he answered, placing a few coins into a jar. "It's enough for bread and medicine." Beside her sat two younger siblings, waiting eagerly. He smiled at them, trying to hide his own hunger. He tore the bread he had brought into 3 parts, giving them the bigger pieces. His father had died 2 years earlier, leaving the family in darkness. There had been no savings, no inheritance, only debts and despair. At first the boy cried every night. But when his mother fell ill, he dried his tears and became the man of the house. He wanted to study, to sit in a classroom like other children he saw walking with books under their arms. But survival came first. The streets had become his classroom, the newspaper his textbook. Still, in the silence of the night when his siblings slept, he sometimes whispered to himself, "One day I'll do something more than just sell these papers." Among his regular customers was an elderly man who owned a tiny stationery shop. Every morning he bought a newspaper and chatted with the boy for a moment. Unlike others, he asked about the headlines. One day the man said, "Do you ever read the paper you sell?" The boy hesitated. "I can read a little. Not much." The old man's eyes softened. "Bring me the unsold ones. I'll lend you books too. You should read. These papers you sell are full of worlds you've never seen." From that day forward, the boy carried home tattered newspapers, spreading them out under the flickering candlelight. At first the words felt heavy, confusing. But slowly he began to piece them together. Stories of leaders, of wars, of discoveries, he devoured them all. The shopkeeper sometimes explained difficult passages. "You see, boy, newspapers don't just tell what happened. They shape how people think. They hold power." Those words planted a seed in his young heart. He was no longer just a vendor. He was a messenger of information. And for the first time he dreamed of being more. Night after night he read until his eyes burned. His siblings often teased him. "Why read when it won't earn us money?" But he smiled. Because words are richer than coins. They can change everything. He began to scribble on scraps of paper, small notes, observations about life in the streets. When he compared them to real articles, his heart raced. Maybe one day, I could write like this. When he sold newspapers, he now looked at the headlines with pride, as though they belonged to him. But deep down he longed to see his own name printed there. His mother noticed his passion. "You're different," she whispered. "Perhaps you'll take us out of this life." Her faith gave him strength. Even when exhaustion pulled him down, he lit another candle and wrote. Dreams, however, didn't shield him from hardship. Rain poured on some mornings, soaking his papers. Customers shouted, refusing to pay for wet copies. Sometimes he went home with nothing. At the newspaper office where he delivered bundles, he peered inside with wide eyes, hoping someone would notice him. But clerks brushed past him. "Move along, boy, you don't belong here." Once he timidly asked a reporter how to become a writer. The man laughed. "You, a street urchin? Learn your place." Shame burned inside him, but he swallowed it. Giving up was not an option. Nights grew colder, food scarcer. His mother's health worsened. His siblings sometimes cried of hunger. Yet instead of despair, the boy worked harder, selling longer hours. Every insult only sharpened his resolve. One evening, while running to deliver papers, he saw an older gentleman stumble and drop his wallet. Without hesitation, the boy picked it up and chased him down. "Sir, you dropped this," he shouted, panting. The man turned out to be none other than the editor of the city's largest newspaper. He was stunned. "You could have kept it. Why return it?" The boy answered simply, "It wasn't mine." The editor, impressed by his honesty, asked his name. When he learned that this boy was not only a vendor but also eager to learn, he invited him to visit the office, not as a delivery boy but as a helper inside. For the first time, the boy stepped into the world he had long admired. The scent of ink and paper filled his lungs, and his heart pounded with possibility. Inside the office, he swept floors, carried documents, and delivered tea. But his eyes were always on the reporters, his ears soaking up their conversations. He memorized their words, their style, their debates. In quiet hours, he practiced writing headlines on discarded sheets. Sometimes he dared to ask questions, and a few kind reporters offered tips. His old mentor, the shopkeeper, continued encouraging him. "Patience, boy. Even a seed takes time to become a tree." Months passed. His dedication caught the editor's attention. One day, the editor handed him a small task: summarize this event in 3 lines. Trembling, he wrote quickly. When the editor read it, he nodded. "Not bad. You may have something in you." That small recognition lit a fire within him. One morning, chaos broke out in the city square. A local strike had erupted and reporters were delayed. The editor turned desperate. "I need someone to cover this, anyone." The boy stepped forward. "I can do it, sir." The editor hesitated, then handed him the chance. With notebook in hand, the boy rushed into the streets, observing every detail, every voice, every face. That evening, his article was printed, a short but vivid piece filled with honesty. Readers praised its rawness. "This feels real," they said. The boy, once mocked for being just a vendor, now saw his name printed on the page. It was a small victory, but it meant everything. Years rolled by. The boy became a man, climbing the ranks of journalism through persistence. He endured betrayals, failures, even times when the paper nearly shut down. Yet he always rose again. He saved every coin, built connections, and never forgot the lessons of the street. Honesty sells better than lies. Eventually, he founded his own newspaper. At first, no one believed in it. Competitors mocked him. But he filled it with truth, stories of common people, stories that mattered. Readers grew. Slowly, advertisers followed. What began as a small venture turned into a respected publication. His name was no longer at the bottom of the page. It was at the very top. One evening years later, he walked past the same street corner where he once shouted headlines as a hungry boy. Now his own newspaper was being sold there. He paused, watching a group of barefoot children selling papers. He saw himself in them. With a soft smile, he approached. "Would you like a better job than this?" he asked them. He hired them as delivery helpers in his company, giving them the chances he never had. Back at home, his mother sat in comfort, proud tears in her eyes. His siblings, now educated, looked up to him with gratitude. He whispered to himself, "From selling newspapers to owning one, dreams are never too big if the heart is strong." And with that, the boy who once sold papers became the man who shaped them.